Hey now, welcome back to the DrupalEasy podcast. This is episode 3 of season 14. Today I'll be talking with Leslie Glynn from Redfin Solutions about how to get started with Project Browser. Now, Leslie is one of the initiative leads for this exciting upcoming feature of Drupal core. Before we get to the interview, let me tell you a little bit about our long-form training courses. Last episode, I told you all about our beginner-focused Drupal career online. That begins February 13th. You can learn more about that at drupaleasy.com/DCO. But don't forget, we are debuting our second long-form Drupal training course, and that is called Professional Module Development. That is 90 hours over 15 weeks, but we're actually also offering a light version of that course, which is 60 hours over 10 weeks. During the course, we'll learn developer tools, dependency injection, custom plugins, caching, and really just so much more. You can learn more about that at drupaleasy.com/PMD. Leslie, welcome back to the DrupalEasy podcast. How are you this morning?
I'm great, Mike. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having me.
You know what I like about you, Leslie? I like the fact that every time I talk to you, you do not bring up the Aaron Winborn Award that you won, unlike
That
some
is,
winners.
yeah, that is true. I do not see that. I'm very honored to have won that, but yeah,
Yes, you're very modest. I like that. It's not in your face.
thank you.
Anyway, we're talking to you today about Project Browser, which is a Drupal community initiative of which you are one of the leads. Do you want to mention the other? I believe there's only one other lead. Am I right on that?
That's correct. It's Chris Wells from Redfin Solutions who's the other lead.
Very good. And this initiative's been going on. I'm going to guess, and I'm really bad at this, so feel free to correct me as soon as I say it. This is probably what, 2 years old, this initiative?
It was announced by Dries at DrupalCon North America 2021. I'm not sure. I don't recall the date of
Oh,
that, but that's when
all
the
right.
initiative. So it isn't quite 2 years yet.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
year and a half, maybe.
I feel pretty good about it though, because you could have said it's 4 years old, and I wouldn't have been shocked that I was so wrong. So, all right. So, explain Project Browser to me like I'm 5 years old.
Okay, so initially, when Dries first announced it, as I just said, the idea was for the project browser to make it easy for site builders to find and install modules. So that was the goal when it was first announced. That was slightly modified in Portland in 2022 at DrupalCon to be. We want to allow folks to discover great modules from within Drupal without having to go to Drupal.org and install those modules with a click of a button. So the whole real idea of it is to allow our target audience is site builders and those new to Drupal, although we anticipate everybody will use a project browser. But the goal is to take away the barrier of having to know Composer, have to know what a terminal is to be able to install modules. All that functionality will be done with a click of a button from the interface, from the UI.
Well, that's super exciting. First of all, um, I guess the phrase I've heard around Project Browser is it's kind of like an app store for Drupal, but more of like a module store for Drupal.
That's correct. Right now it's modules. We started with modules. That's easy. That's the easiest thing. We're hoping to add additional things there as well.
Additional things. So I'm going to
Like
guess
like themes possibly,
mhm,
not distributions because
recipes,
they're yes, correct. Recipes, yes.
recipes in the
Yep.
future. Yep.
Yep. So we're hoping to expand a bit. We're starting out with just modules.
All right. So this is still in development. It's currently lives in Contrib, I believe. Correct.
That's correct. Yep.
All right. And so the whole gist of this podcast is how to get involved in the Project Browser initiative. So I was actually pleasantly surprised when I went to the project page and I saw that there's multiple ways, relatively easy ways to test Project Browser. You want to tell us about those three real quick?
Sure. Let's talk prior to we had a beta 2 release the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That actually allows you to do the install with the click of a button. We'll talk about that again, but the Gitpod and Gitpod does not allow you to spin up the beta 2 release, but you can still use Gitpod to help us test. You just won't have that install button. The
Mhm.
button will say view commands, and basically it gives you a pop up with all the different commands you would have to run to
Right.
install other things.
Let me clarify just real quick what you're saying, because this threw me for a second or two as well.
Yep,
So it'll probably throw other folks. So before this most recent beta 2 release, when you selected a module through the project browser, you would hit a button and it would basically show you the commands, the composer commands or the drush command, I suppose, to download and install that module. And that's really kind of only half of what the promise of Project Browser is. The other half is to actually install it as well. And that's, you know, completely related to another strategic initiative, which is automatic updates. It's just a way of installing modules from the UI or updating modules from the UI, which we'll talk about in another podcast. So the beta 2 actually added that functionality to click the button and have it automatically install without you ever having to open up a terminal or anything like that.
that is correct. So it interfaces with package manager and automated updates, as you said, to
Right.
have all that stuff done.
Package Manager is a new module that is a dependency of both Project Browser and automatic updates. Do I have that right?
That's correct. You need to install that first, correct?
All right. So you can test some of Project Browser. Well, maybe not test, but you can contribute partly using Gitpod. What are the other two ways?
Well, simply test.me. Currently, there is an ongoing issue. There is an issue in the issue queue for that. So simply test.me is not an alternative at the moment.
Oh no, we're
But
down two. So we're
yeah,
down
we're
to
down
one.
to Gitpod you still can use. Very valuable for folks who are newer to Drupal and site builders to go in and just look at the interface. I'm trying to find a module to help me out. You
Yeah, we're
know,
going to talk about that in a moment.
yep.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, right. So the third way is locally. You can just compose or require the project browser beta 2 version. And then there's a couple of commands to install the things we've talked about, package manager, and then automated updates. And then there's a flag. So by default, the automated updates will not be turned on.
Mhm.
There's just a flag that you have to select to say, I want to use that. And that's just the current way the UI is working.
Okay.
So there is a link to the instructions to do that, which I will share with you, and you can share in the
All right.
notes.
Perfect. So the first thing I normally look at whenever I install a new module, although technically I guess I should say whenever I install a new project, is what modules are included. So I know that Project Browser includes more than just the main project browser module. I believe there's two others. Can you just briefly mention what those are and what they do?
Yep, I can start with the other one that I know is being used right now with Project Browser, which is the source example. So a project browser source by default, and we're going to talk about this in a minute actually, is the interface. But the source example allows you to have other collections of modules besides just the contrib modules. So again, we'll get into that in the next section, but that's what the project browser source example. Like I'm Stanford University or company ABC, and I have my list of preferred modules. How do I set up that source so that when people on my team building sites for my organization go to project browser, it'll pull in the modules that I prefer as opposed to just pulling in the contrib modules in
So let
general.
me ask you a question about that because that's interesting. So is that a list of custom modules or is that a list of, use the word preferred, which is what I'm keying in on. Is
Mhm.
that like a subset of the contrib modules on Drupal.org that are kind of allowed, quote unquote, for that particular organization? Or is it a combination of custom
No,
and
it's the latter, I believe.
okay.
It's the preferred modules that you want your company or organization to use as opposed to others. There's a lot of modules out there. So if you
As
have a set
opposed to
that
all of the
works together,
modules?
correct, correct.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Very
So that's
cool.
what that one does. Devel, I honestly have never used it before. So right now, I can't tell you. There's two arms to this whole project team. There's the site builder subcommittee, which I lead, and then which is more the UI testing. Making sure that it's going to be useful for our target audience. And then there's a technical team. I can get an answer for you on that, but I right now cannot tell you what Devel does.
Well,
Have
let's
not
just say it
used it.
does developer-y stuff and leave
Yep,
it at that.
correct.
All
Yep.
right. All right. So the interface is really cool. I actually hadn't played with it in a few months, so I installed beta 2 a day or two
Hmm.
ago, and I was playing with it.
Hmm.
And my initial question, and I know you're going to have an answer for this because this is, as you just said, you're kind of leading the site building side of it. My first big question was how who decides or how is it decided which modules appear, by default on that very first page.
Okay, so the key thing is, which is different from going to the Drupal.org page, is it's only going to return modules that will work with the version of Drupal that your site is built in. So we're within a Drupal site. If it's Drupal 9, for instance, it'll only bring back modules that are compatible with Drupal 9.
Helpful.
It won't bring back all the Drupal 7 and 8 and all those other modules that you wouldn't want to choose for a Drupal 9 site. So that's a huge win. So, and it's right from within your module that you're doing this browsing. The second thing is we're only, by default, we're bringing back modules that are covered by the security policy. So that's another check that we do. And the third one is it maintained? Is it at least moderately maintained? So those are the three defaults. And then it brings you back the top use. So it goes by usage. So the first one is the one that is used the most, and then it goes down from there. So
Oh, so it actually uses the same numbers that we see on the project page on Drupal.org for the usage. That's what the order.
that's the default sort order. There's other ways to sort them, but that's the default because it's what do most people install is what somebody new to Drupal would want to look at is the assumption.
So the maintained bit, is that a judgment call anywhere, or is that like what dictates if something is maintained or not? Is there a rule? Is there like a quantitative rule?
Yes, there is. It's from the Drupal.org page, and it's the maintenance status, I believe, and there's a couple of them that we include. I don't remember this. This was about a year ago that we made that
Oh, that's
decision.
right.
But
Yeah,
yes, it's stuff that's maintained. We don't really look at the development status.
right.
We look at the maintenance. There's two different things on Drupal.org. We look at the maintenance and make sure it's at least minimally maintained before we will show it by default.
I guess the pessimist in me, which is a very small part of me, I like to think, I look at something like this and I'm like, okay, how can this be gained? Right? If
Hmm.
someone wants to like really promote their module and get it up, towards the top of this list by default, it seems like none of this is qualitative. It's all quantitative based on existing data on Drupal.org. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's the idea. One thing we're also doing, which we haven't talked about, is categories is another filter.
Oh, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, good. Okay, so we
Because
can
I know
talk
you've
about
done a
how
lot of
that's
work on that.
Yep, yeah, we can talk about that, how that was being used to promote modules possibly. So yeah, we can talk about that one. But those are the defaults. There are advanced filters, just so people who might be listening who are more advanced. There are the advanced filters that allow you to do things like development status or show me ones that aren't covered by security policy. So you still can get to that, but that's hidden, behind a filter. You can't actually
Yep.
see those by default.
So, are there plans or have there been discussions for adding additional filters in the future? I don't know what they would be. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it seems like, with any search tool, whether you're searching for modules or using, DuckDuckGo or something like that, there's always, advanced filters that can really help you narrow it down.
Right. Yep. So there are other things like I didn't mention the main one, which is the textual search. So
Sure.
you can just go
Yep.
in and you can put in the module name. We intend to have that cover the short description, possibly the categories. So that's one way. That's one way a lot of people search is they just type something in. They've heard about, you know, uh, redirect, and they'll just type in that word. So that's one filter that I neglected to mention. One of the other ones we're thinking about adding is ecosystem. So there is an ecosystem. So let's just say it's commerce, the commerce ecosystem. There's a lot of modules that are dependent, and once you install, let's just say it's commerce, there's a bunch of other modules, payments and all that kind of stuff that you can get. So that would bring back all the related modules that are part of the ecosystem, which is defined on Drupal.org. The same with web form has an ecosystem.
I would imagine that's got an over some overlap with the categories, though. Ecosystem and categories are not quite the same thing, but in the same ballpark.
Yep, and we can talk about how we're hoping to differentiate that.
So one of the things that I thought, and I didn't even think that this would be part of this project until I heard about it. I'm like, oh well, that makes sense that this needs to be done. In addition to the categories, which we're going to talk about next,
Mhm.
the fact that I know that your team has put a lot of work into writing teasers, like small little descriptions of these modules, as well as, creating icons for, some of these modules that don't have icons yet. And it adds a lot to that, to the project browser page as you're scrolling through to see, an icon, a name, a one or two sentence description, some categories or tags,
Right. So, yeah, a lot of effort's been happening there. A lot of contributions from across the community of all different levels. People brand new to Drupal and experienced module maintainers have helped out. But yeah, so a designer's easy way to get involved is to create the logos or review somebody else's logos. The You call it teaser, we call it short description.
Okay, fair enough.
It is going to use the summary field on Drupal.org. So there's a body field and there's a summary, which is not being used for anything. It's a 200 character summary field. So instead of just grabbing the first 200 characters of the description or the body,
Mhm.
we decided that having a short, non technical, and that's key, non technical description
Yeah.
is what we wanted on the cards on the front page of the project browser. So it's just a quick synopsis of what this module will do for me if I'm looking for a module, and then I can drill further into it to see the details.
So how are those, I mean, are you opening issues, well, not you personally, but the team, opening issues in like the top 100 most used modules for, a short description and an icon, and kind of working in issues directly in each module's issue queue? Or is this being handled in the project browser issue queue?
Currently, it's being handled in the project browser issue queue. So there is a meta issue for each module, and then there are three child issues: one for the logo,
Mhm.
one for the short description, and then one for the categories because we do have to clean. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But yes,
No, let's
so
talk about
those.
that now. That's
Okay,
a great segue. Let's go right
okay,
to it. Yeah,
all right.
so I think a lot of folks who have been around the Drupal community as long as you and I have, Leslie, I'll speak for myself here, but the categories have kind of become less and less useful as time has gone on, because they were just, quite a mess. There was some duplication in there, and I just didn't really think it was very high quality data. And I know early on this was something that you and the rest of the team kind of identified as something that needs to be cleaned up. So tell us about that effort.
Right. So that effort has been ongoing. We did a research first to look at the current categories. There are 55 current categories, which is way too many. There's a lot of duplication. As you say, there's a lot of old categories like CCK, which aren't really relevant anymore. So we started a project to take those and see how we could, eliminate, change, rename them, add new ones, and we decided we actually had a BOF. Geez, I don't remember which camp it was at. Could have been bad camp. That we talked about, what approach should we use? This is going to take forever to go through all these categories and figure out, what we should do. So somebody, it was actually Susan Dekachevitz from Evolving Web that came up with the idea of why don't we just start with a minimal number and go from there. So basically, what we're doing now is we have like 18 categories. We're creating descriptions of those. What we feel would fall into those 18, and we've been having the last two meetings we had Zoom calls as opposed to just asynchronous Slack meetings where we actually talked about it. And we're trying to figure out if that 18 is the right number. And the next round is to figure out which categories would fit into those. I'm sorry, which modules will fit into those categories.
Mhm.
And then we're going to run it by the maintainers. And then we're going to run it by a set of people in our target audience to make sure that the naming of those categories would resonate with somebody that's looking for a
Wow.
module. So we're trying to make that a lot easier. Right now, there are some modules, I think they have, and I forget the number, let's just say 25, 30 categories assigned to them. So
Yeah.
your module would appear no matter which category you selected.
Yeah,
We are
exactly.
trying to limit it. We're trying to limit it to three, the top three
Right.
categories. So one to three categories that your module um, would fall under. And I just want to finish one thing that we started talking about was the maintainers. So yes, the issues are in the project browser queue right now, but after the issues get worked on and they're ready for review, I create an issue in the maintainers queue with the suggested logo, the suggested description, suggested categories, and then they go and make the changes. So that's how we're going to work with the maintainers to get this all done.
Okay, first of all, wow. Because this is, what I'm really impressed so far is, we've been talking, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes so far, and we haven't really talked about anything code. Like everything we've talked about from how to, get involved in the project browser initiative has been from the non-code side of things, which I think is fantastic. Number two, correct me if I'm wrong, currently in beta 2, the categories that are displayed in project browser are the old categories, not the new categories, right?
That is correct.
I did want to say that out loud because if you go, I'm staring at the interface right now, and I always chuckle whenever I see content construction kit
Yep.
references.
Mhm.
Because anyone who's been in the community for 5 years or less is like, oh, content construction kit, that sounds new. What is that? And we're like, oh
Mhm.
no, that's the
Right.
opposite.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That was the first thing I identified that was like, "Oh, yeah, that one's gotta go."
Yeah. And then my third point is, just what a huge amount of work, um, uh, the categorization, the writing the short descriptions, and the designing the new icons is, especially when you consider, and I don't know, are you focusing just on the top 100, 200? Like, what are you focusing on on a subset of contributor modules right now for that effort?
Yes, right now we're doing, the top 100, and we've made really good progress on the top 50. Sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 that's fine. So great progress on the top 50. That's good. So I would imagine, and you and I have not talked about this, but I would imagine that there is some hope among the team that if between getting the top 100 sorted and Project Browser getting more eyeballs on it and tested and getting closer to moving into core, that those two things are going to encourage module maintainers to update their own short description, logo, and categories. Is that the idea? I can't imagine that your team is super excited about, okay, well, we got the first 100 done. Now let's do the next 1900.
Correct. Yeah, that is correct. So the hope is that once module maintainers get more familiar with the project browser, see it and see how it's being used, that they will just go in and, add these things. They might not add the logos. We might need, designers to come in and add the logos for some of their modules, but it'll just be an issue that's created for that. But yeah, hopefully they will at least try to create short, non-technical descriptions, and then we'll just have community feedback on those like we do for everything else.
Right, right, right. Okay, this is super exciting stuff.
Mhm.
All right. So I will ask one question. I will ask many questions, as has been the case so far. And this might get more to the technical side of it, or I don't know, maybe not. But one of the first things I did when I installed it was I wanted to play with that search, and I was thinking about meta tag module, but I didn't want to search for meta tag. And you can tell me, you can cut me off anytime and basically say, well, the search isn't done yet. We're not indexing all the fields or whatever. But I searched for SEO, hoping that meta tag would come up high in those results, and it didn't. Now, is that more of an issue with we need to write better teasers, or is that more of a a categorization issue, or is that more of a technical type of issue?
Your first statement that the search is not completed yet is the answer to all of those. So yes, we want
Perfect.
the short descriptions to have those type of tags within them.
Right.
Right now, it's not looking at categories. It's right now. I believe it's only looking at the description field.
So if I was, well, let's say if I was me, as I am me, and I ran across that. Is that an issue that I should submit as a bug right now? Or now knowing that search is not ready and working, should I hold off on something like that?
I would recommend creating an issue if an issue doesn't already exist with what you hope that people, folks put into that search box. So you hope that it's going to look at categories. You hope that it's going to look at short descriptions. If that doesn't exist, that would be helpful to know what your expectations are for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, and even me included, when you're playing with a pre-release version of anything and you find a bug, there's always a little bit of hesitation about, should I file that bug report? It's still in beta, so they probably know about it, right? That they probably know about it, idea. But
Right.
I
But where
think, I mean,
you
that's a go ahead.
go ahead.
I
Oh, I
was
was
gonna
just
say,
going to say,
no, you go. You're
okay.
my guest.
Okay. I was just gonna say that, we do everything with issues, so if there isn't an issue, it hasn't been identified as an independent little thing that we need to work on,
Ah,
so you are helping us by creating those issues.
all right, very good. And that's a super valuable contribution as well.
Correct. Yep.
Is to, like, if you're just playing with this thing for a half hour and you see something like that, go to the project browser issue queue, search for it, and see if someone else already reported it. If not, report it. Absolutely.
Mhm.
All right, so let's kind of get down to the nitty gritty about answering this question of how to contribute, and then we'll kind of finish up. I want to talk about the integration with automatic, or not automatic, well, with what's the
The package manager?
package
Yep.
manager? That's the word I couldn't think
Mhm.
of. Package manager. Thank you. So we'll talk about that in a
Okay.
second. But it seems like we've identified, to answer the question of the podcast is how to get involved in Project Browser Initiative from a non-code standpoint. You know, get in the issue queue. If you want to write teasers, look for, I'm sure it's probably pretty easy in the Project Browser issue queue to find issues related to writing teasers, categorization, working on that. If you're a designer, if you have any design skills whatsoever, I'm sure, Leslie, you can give me like how many folks are actually creating these logos? Is it like, I'm going to guess less than five?
No, 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 I would say closer to 10 to 15. So when we have different contrib days at all these different camps and DrupalCons, folks come, designers come, and they just, they might only do for that day, or they might come back and do some more when they have time. But yeah, we've had a lot of different folks contribute to that, which is great for the
Oh,
design
that's
community.
wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should be surprised by that or not, but that's fantastic. How about folks who just want to download it, install it, and test it? Like, at this point in time, at beta 2, what areas should they be focusing on testing?
I think if they haven't seen it before and they just use Gitpod and they don't even do beta 2, they do beta 2, but they don't have the ability to automatically install. Just, it doesn't make sense. Is it non-tactical enough for them to understand how to go and search for modules? Are there any things that aren't working? So that's one thing. We do have a Kanban board
Yes.
that has the top 100 in it, and that has everything that like needs work, needs review, etc. That's the place to go if you want to work on the teasers or short descriptions or the designing of the logos or the categories.
I already have that link in the show
Okay,
notes, so that will definitely be in the
perfect.
show
Yeah, that's
notes.
really helpful for
Fantastic.
folks to just go there and it only takes a few minutes to do some of those. So all contributions welcome there by any skill levels.
And let's throw a bone to folks who want to get involved on the code side of things. What's kind of the best first step for folks who want to get involved on the code
I
side of
would say
things with
so. We
Project
have
Browser?
two weekly meetings, asynchronous Slack typically. Tuesdays at 10 a.m. is the site builder subcommittee that I lead, so I run that meeting. On Wednesdays, I'm sorry, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. I misspoke. Is the site builder subcommittee. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. and those are both Eastern. 10 a.m. Eastern is more the technical discussion. So I would recommend getting there, coming in there, or just hopping in the project browser channel on Drupal Slack and say I'm interested in helping out from a code standpoint. Maybe you're interested in Svelte JavaScript and you want to get into that because once this module goes to core, Svelte has to go to be in core. So maybe that's an area that you're interested in. So yeah, I would recommend one of those two options.
And it's on in the Drupal Slack, it's pound project dash browser, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right, very good. Okay, so let's I want to talk real quick about this, what I think is very exciting, and this is kind of the, in my opinion, one of the killer features of this effort is the ability to have the one-click install. So as we mentioned, 20 minutes ago or so, that as you browse a module with before beta 2, if you liked it, you hit the button, it would show you the instructions on how to install it with Composer, run this command, blah, 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 blah. But with beta 2 and the package manager module, it's a one-click install, which is super exciting. I tested on my local machine. Most folks who know me know that I run DDev,
Hmm.
no issues whatsoever. So do you expect, and I know this, this is always a question I have whenever I think or talk about automatic updates, is the one-click install is great for a certain percentage of users, who have a particular type of hosting.
Hmm.
But for me, that challenge, and this is, coming from someone who builds sites and teaches this stuff and uses Git every day and stuff like that. I think it's a little bit confusing for a lot of people. If I do a one-click install, how do I commit that to the repository? So how does that? I mean, in your head, how does that kind of like gel? Like how do you talk to someone about Project Browser and one-click install with kind of that big? To me, it feels like a big caveat hanging over my head on that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Quite honestly, I haven't been involved with any of the detailed discussions
Okay.
with Ted Bowman and the team on that. But
Yeah.
that is the reason that they did put the default to not allow the automated updates, at least right now.
Right.
That you have to select that. As a new user of the site, it's great because if I install token, for instance, if I hit the button that says install it, it goes and it realizes that Path Auto is a dependency.
Yeah.
So it'll not only install token, it installs Path Auto for you as well. So they don't even have to know that Path
Well, I think you
Auto.
have that backwards, but I take your
Oh
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, okay.
Other way around, but that's okay.
I probably do, but yes, you can test that,
Yeah.
using beta two. But there are questions about, there's a lot of different hosts, a lot of different setups, and automatic updates will work for some, may give you some errors on others. So that's something that we need help with. Test and beta 2 is for folks to go in and see with their configuration how, does it work, what types of errors does it come up with, and that's more in the automated updates initiative queue to kind of work on those. Project Browser is relying on the great work that those teams do to take care of all those issues.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that one aspect of it because I think it's going to, it's a great feature, but it's going to change. I think it's probably going to have some type of trickle down effect to Drupal hosting as well, because it's one of those features that folks are going to want, but they're not going to want to hear that, oh, I can't have it because, of my hosting and Git and this and that.
Mhm.
So I think it's a really interesting problem of our own making, and it's kind of, I think it's the it's the type of problem we want.
But it does solve the problem of people being, I don't want to say afraid of, but people hesitating to do all this because of the terminal and because of Composer, and that's all very technical, and we're trying to get around that. So hopefully, for a set of individuals, this install button is going to be a big win for Drupal.
I think in some ways it cuts both ways because once it becomes really easy for folks to install stuff, the question is, should you install all this
Mhm.
stuff?
Right,
Because
exactly.
not now, oh, I'm going to test these 13 modules,
Oh
and
yeah.
oh,
Mhm.
I didn't know I have to disable them if I'm not, or uninstall them if I'm not using them. So I think it's going to be interesting. We're going to have new problems, new challenges in the future.
Yes. Oh, I agree. But that's what's fun about Drupal, right? You
Yep.
have a community. We solve all these new challenges. One
Right.
more thing that we haven't mentioned is the recipes initiative, which also ties in very directly to Project Browser. So when we first started, we had this thing on use cases. People come to Project Browser and they have a specific thing in mind. I want to create an event website, an event, or I want to
Right.
do a library website or something. So the recipes, hopefully, will be allowed, also allow folks to search for a recipe and say, give me all the modules and configuration that I need to create an event, management system here. So that's how recipes will come in.
Fantastic. All right, Leslie, thank you very much for your time. I do have one final question for you.
Hmm.
Knowing that you are are you originally from Massachusetts? Do I have that right?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
All right. So you're going to have to think about this question for a moment. It probably involves a very large number. I grew up in Connecticut, just over the border of Massachusetts, and it's kind of a joke I have with my family and friends up there. But Leslie, I'm going to ask you right now, within 5 miles of where you are right now, how many Dunkin' Donuts are there?
I want to say within 5 miles.
I bet you it's more than 20.
Yeah, I would guess that it probably is more than 20. Right now, my town, there's probably 6 or 7. So, yeah, unbelievable. Dunkin' Donuts. Not many Tim Hortons, but there are a lot of Dunkin' Donuts.
How far is the closest one to you? Yeah. Oh my god, that's fantastic. Oh, no. I was driving home yesterday, and I drove home a slightly different route because I was actually meeting my son for dinner, and there's a brand new Dunkin' Donuts that went up, seemingly overnight,
Wow.
because I think I just drove down that road, maybe 3 weeks ago, and I didn't see any sign of the Dunkin' Donuts, so the worldwide invasion is full on.
Yeah, well, I know the architect that does a lot of the Dunkins.
Oh, wow.
He actually did the addition to the house that I'm in. He's a friend from college. Yeah. Yep. So
So
he does a lot of the Dunkins. He probably did the one that sprung up in your son's neighborhood.
so you have Dunkin' Donuts in your house now. That's fantastic. So that counts as the closest one. It's like yeah, I even as you know, and some other folks know, I spend time in Belgium, and there are now Dunkin' Donuts in the cities in Belgium. Maybe not all of them, but at least in Antwerp, there's multiple Dunkin' Donuts.
Nice.
Which, well, I don't know if it's nice. I mean, it's a bit much if you ask me.
Yeah, well, for folks that love Dunkin' Donuts, I guess that
Yeah.
works.
The funny thing is they don't open early in Belgium. They open like 9 a.m. So it's not so
Wow.
much like an early morning coffee place as it is like a afternoon donut and dessert store. Yeah,
Hmm, yeah,
it's kind of a weird thing.
different.
Anyway, all right, Leslie, I think we've talked enough.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to thank all the contributors who have helped us so far and welcome anybody that wants to help us out. This small amount of time as you have, you're welcome.
All right, thank you, Leslie, and all the links we talked about, I'll put in the show notes.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike, for having me.